So if you want the story on the video and you weren't here last week, you're going to have to listen to the sermon from last week. Our homegrown talent producing that great intro in our Trust series. And speaking of last Sunday, so after last Sunday and its message, did you trust the will of God this past week with something? Did you surrender your will to the will of God where there was an area of conflict? That was your homework, even though we didn't use the H word at the end of the sermon. That was what we were to do. Go out and find something, just surrender something to God and say, hey, this is what I want, God, but if this is different than what you want, what I want most in my life is what you want. Not my will, but your will be done. And so, just concretely, did you wind up apologizing to that person that you've been putting off? You didn't want to do it. You didn't want to eat humble pie. You didn't want to admit that you were wrong. But did you go ahead and say, not my will, but your will, Lord, I'm sorry, to whomever that was? Did you speak the truth at the dinner table? Because everybody is just waiting for somebody to break the ice and just say what's true. Or in the workplace, no matter what the cost. Did you write out the check for the money that you needed to give? God was tugging on your heart, telling you, and you were resisting. Did you just give the money to the person or to the need that he was directing you? Or as a parent, did you finally say, I have my agenda for my child, my children, but you have your agenda for them as well, Lord. And if that's different than my will, let your will be done. My will for my children is that they would follow Jesus Christ in life wherever Jesus takes them, no matter what the cost, no matter what the destination. Has that been your prayer for your children? Not my will, but your will be done. What we really want in life, and really what our children want, whether they know it or not, is God. We want God, and then we want more and more of God when we get a taste of Him. But how do we find Him? How do we get God? Jesus Christ shows us His own life, and then He invites each one of us into that life. And these past weeks, He's been teaching us how to talk to this God, how to talk to the Father, how to pray in His so-called Lord's Prayer, which shows us, actually opens up a whole new way of life, a whole new approach to life based on a relationship with a Father who offers solutions to all of our needs and problems. And Jesus says, as we've sung and already prayed this morning, He says this as He teaches us. He says, pray in this way, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. First things first. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. So if we really want God in life, which we really do, we come to know God only as a Father and us as adopted children. There is no other way to come to know God. The whole story of salvation, this relationship with the Father, this unprecedented mercy and grace poured out upon your life, captured in this simple beginning, our Father, is the whole gospel. God is no longer our judge. He's our Father. And so that's how we talk to Him, that's how we pray to Him. And beginning with those two words, that changes everything that follows, everything in Christian prayer. But it's our Father in heaven, we're reviewing now, right? As close as a Father, but above and beyond us. He's not one of us. He's other than us. He's awesome in His power and His splendor. Now, we're going to continue our review, but just take a little pause, push the pause button. I want you to think about your earliest memory of the Old Testament story of Moses, the Old Testament Hebrew figure who led the ancient Hebrews out of bondage in Egypt into freedom, into the wilderness first, and they were wandering around. Maybe as you think about that image, some of you who are older may see Charlton Heston in your mind because he played that role in the movie, The Ten Commandments, right? Some of you who are younger, maybe you grew up on the animated version of this whole story, Prince of Egypt, and so you have that picture in your mind. But as Moses was on Mount Sinai receiving the Ten Commandments, good, you're awake with me. Remember, there's this idea of these 2 tablets of stone, and the 10 words are written on these tablets. First tablet, they have to do with our relationship with God. Commandment number 1, no other gods before me. Number 2, don't make images of me in order to worship me. Number 3, don't abuse my name, honor it. Number 4, keep the Sabbath day as a day for me. So 4 words all have to do with our relationship with God. And then the second set, the second tablet, have to do with our relationship with other people. Honor your parents. No murder. No adultery. No stealing. No lying in a court of law. And no coveting. That is, starting with the mind. Don't even start thinking about putting your paws on your neighbor's stuff. So second set have to do with people. These obligations to God and to people. The Lord's Prayer is actually set up the same way as the 10 Commandments are. You have 2 sets of requests. The first set have to do with God. Here we are back in review. Hallowed be your name. In other words, may your name may you be loved, honored, and obeyed. Your kingdom come, that's number 2. So your sovereign rule, may it come down and be established in this world. The healing of nations, beginning with the healing of people. Your justice, your righteousness be established. Your will be done. That's request number 3. And we could sum up the last 3 weeks with these words. The name is hallowed wherever the Son, S-O-N, is followed. And wherever the Son is followed, the kingdom comes. And wherever the kingdom comes, God's will is done. So first set of requests have to do with God, and now like the 10 Commandments, Jesus takes us into the second set of requests in this famous prayer of his, and these have to do with people. People need bread, and they need forgiveness, and they need protection. But also, like the second tablet, the second section of the 10 Commandments, the second section of the Lord's Prayer is not secondary. Not second class, not of lesser importance than the first section. And Jesus explains this in Matthew 22, a few chapters ahead in the gospel that we're in. He's approached by a young man who has a very earnest and sincere question. The man asks him, what is the greatest commandment? I mean, of all that's out there, what's really number 1? And you remember Jesus' answer? He says, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and your soul and your strength and your mind, with everything you've got, all you, all in. And then he says, actually there's another commandment, and he says the second is like unto the first. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And that's really a summary of the 10 Commandments, those 2. When he says this second commandment about loving your neighbor is like unto the first, what he's saying is, it's of equal importance. It's of equal standing. You do not do one without the other. Don't talk to me about how much you love God if you're ignoring your neighbor. You cannot love God without loving that neighbor. A big part of God love is neighbor love. And in terms of the Lord's Prayer, the Father's name is not hallowed. The kingdom does not come and his will is not done if people are not at the same time fed, forgiven, and delivered from evil. You cannot even pray about the things of God without at the same time praying for the needs of others. And so it's no accident that the prayer for people's needs, this second section, is right on the heels of Jesus saying, may the Father's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so with that, let's get into this first set in the second section. And we'll have it up on the screen. Give us this day our daily bread. That's the prayer. Give us enough bread day by day. Just for today, we're asking for that. And this is something really important about Christianity that sets it off from all the other world's religions. And that is this, that your body, your earthly life, is not all there is to life, but it's a big part of life. And it's very important to God. Jesus lived for your life in your body right now. He died for your life, and he rose again so that you would have life, not just later, but right here and right now, in your body, in this life. Beware of any teaching, any preaching out there, and there's a lot of this on sort of popular spirituality on TV these days, Oprah religion. This idea, any religious group that might regard the body as just a container, just a shell, it's not really essentially part of you, but it's sort of glorified Tupperware, and you're inside, and it's disposable, that it's less important than the soul or the spirit. You know what? That's Eastern religious thinking. That's ancient Greek philosophy. That is New Age spirituality. That is Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy. And that's totally against classical biblical Christianity. That's against the way Jesus saw things and taught us how to pray. This degrading of the body, making it sort of second tier, is not Christian. And it's anti-people. And it's anti-God. Because God so valued the body that he took on a body in the person of Jesus, and that body bled and died and rose again from the grave in order to heal and restore your body, now as well as later. That's why Christianity and Western Christian nations with that heritage set up hospitals and feed hungry people all over the world. No other civilizations, no other religious systems do that. We do that. And it's because Christianity says the body's important, this life is important. In the Lord's Prayer, we get physical right away. And the first thing necessary to pray about is your survival. Now, we're all going to die someday. But right now, your life and your body is important to the Father. Forgiveness enables you to stand up straight and hold your head up high. We're going to get to that next week. But first, Jesus wants you to stand up, period. And you cannot do that if you're physically weak. Material, physical needs do not lie outside of Christian prayer. They're right at the center, and Jesus teaches that this morning, and they're to be prayed for. Now, notice I said material, physical needs. I didn't say luxurious wishes. The prayer is for daily bread, not daily cake, right? I was talking to a pastor friend of mine, and he and his church, they were building a new sanctuary. And, you know, that can be really complicated. High stress, problems, glitches. He was supposed to leave on vacation. He did, but he took all of his worries with him on vacation. Anybody ever done that around here? And he was so restless this Wednesday night of his first week away that he was just wide awake at 1 a.m. in the morning. And so he got up, turned the television on, wife was sleeping, channel surfing, and he landed on this program showing these two Siamese twins who had been joined at the hip since birth, and they were living life in that condition. And it was all about their life and what it meant to live life that way and all the struggles attached. And as Gary told me, he said, suddenly all of my problems shrank to proper size. I mean, he said, here are these two people, and I'm losing sleep over a construction project? Now, the point is not to deny the anxiety and the importance of that project or whatever it is you're worrying about. The point is to get perspective on it. Is it a need? And if it is, what kind of a need is it? How great is that need? Or is it a luxury that you're really worrying about? Some kind of first world problem? Is it really going to matter a year from now? Or 10 years from now? Or 25 years from now? Is your life, is your joy, or somebody else's life and joy really to some degree dependent on it? If the answer is no, then pray about letting that thing go. If the answer is yes, then it's a need. And Jesus wants you to pray about it. Take it to the Father and say, please provide me with this. That's Christian prayer. And that's what often people think of when they think of prayer in general. I mean, you ask the person on the street, what are they going to pray about? They're going to pray, they get in a foxhole, their life is in danger. They start asking for things. That's what they often think of for prayer. And that's basic and natural, and Jesus says, yes, pray about those things. Talk to the Father about them, about what you need. But there's more here, and Jesus says to pray for our daily bread. He doesn't teach you to pray for my daily bread. It's a plural. Dale Bruner, who's helped us along the way these past months as we've been in Matthew, says this. He says, why should Jesus, who fed his 5,000, not want us to pray for our 7.5 billion, that's the global population today, many of whom are hungry, many of them starving? I mean, this prayer should stick in the throats of Christians with full refrigerators. This prayer should remind us of the so-called wretched of the earth and to pray for them. Many of our brothers and sisters around the world, I mean, if you took all the Christians in the world and you gathered them together and you just looked at all of them and did some statistical analysis and said, what does the average Christian look like today? She would be a single mother in poverty in Africa. The majority of world Christianity looks like that, not like you and me here. And so when you pray, give us this day our daily bread, you're praying for all of them, as well as us right here. You're praying against injustice that keeps people in crushing, grinding poverty. You're praying against corrupt systems that have been set up by those in power to favor themselves and further disadvantage the poor whom they're living off, to keep them hungry. You're praying, Lord, show us what to do about this in an indirect way. What are we going to do about these hungry people? Again, you just thought this was this nice little Sunday school prayer you teach the kids. This is revolutionary stuff. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives near me. I went to college with her, and she has become really quite wealthy just through her life. Very talented, hardworking person. Seminary graduate. She's in healthcare. And she was really struggling with, she said, how do I pray this prayer? I have all that I need. But she wasn't looking at the our bread. And as we looked at this together, we just said we need to consider this a call to pray for people who don't have bread, and perhaps even to do something about it. And this is how that works. You may have heard the story of the little girl who lived next door to the little boy who wasn't such a good little boy. He had this habit. I mean, just imagine a neighborhood out in the Midwest or in the East where they don't have fences, little yards. They have big yards, no fences, all right, lots of trees. And he would go out and capture birds from the trees in the bushes, and he'd take them into the basement, put them in cages, and just keep them locked up in these cages in the dark, close the door. It's terrible. The little girl, she was really struggling with this. And at night, she would kneel down by her bed and pray her prayers. And regularly at night, she would say, God, what are you going to do about those birds? You've got to do something about those birds. I mean, every night, God, what will you do about those birds? One night, all the lights were out. She got out of bed, crept down the stairs, crept outside. Parents were sleeping, across to the neighbor boy's house, broke into the basement. I mean, kids know how to get in where they want to get in, right? And she wandered through the basement and opened all the cages, let all the birds go, and they flew out the door, and they were free and happy, and she was happy. And then she snuck back out, closed the door, back into her house, crept upstairs, and she was about to get into bed, and then she knelt down by her bed, and she prayed. She said, Lord, thank you for doing something about those birds. That's what the Lord's Prayer does to the people of God with this line. You begin to pray about something, and your body and your money is going to follow your heart and your mind. What's that old saying from the Watergate scandal in the 70s that took down our president? Follow the money. You follow the money, you're going to find out where your heart and your mind are, what you really love, what you really care about. And this little girl and the people of God, they follow their hearts and their minds into the kingdom coming for people in need. Dale Bruder just concludes this section. He says, the Church of Jesus Christ will always suffer an uneasy conscience whenever it fails to pray and work for bread for hungry people. And as you pray for hungry people, here's something that you can do. We have the info right up on the screen. You can support our Shepherd's Pantry. I call it our. It's not really our, but we did start it, right? And many of you have been involved in Shepherd's Pantry, providing food and clothing for people in need in this community. And there's lots of ways to get involved. You can volunteer, you can give money, you can contribute things. You can just learn about the realities of the many people in need in this part of Southern California. And I learned after the first hour that we also started another outfit, Sowing Seeds for Life in Pomona, good for Glenkirk. So you can get involved. If you want to go global, just go online for World Vision. You can adopt a child. You can do all kinds of things. Let's wrap this up. This prayer and this line teaches us that when all is said and done, day by day, you and I depend on the living God for our survival and to keep things going. Our superabundance in the U.S. of A. makes us forget that, but God wants us to remember that and to grow in that awareness and to talk to Him regularly about our needs and the basic life needs of our neighbors and of our world. And then, if He calls on us, to act. When you pray for daily bread, this is John Calvin 500 years ago. He says, you pray that God would protect and cherish the life which He has given us in this world and to supply us with everything He knows to be helpful for that life. Let me conclude with another little story. The pastor of my youth, George Munzing, down at Trinity Church, Santa Ana, just down the freeway, he was on a cruise on vacation some years ago, and they were sailing out of a port in the Caribbean. They were on this nice ship, and they'd been touring in the nice areas of the city, but as they sailed out of the harbor, everybody was on the deck at the railings just looking at the view, and on the hillside surrounding the city were these shanty towns, just these slums. And this woman, whom he didn't know, just remarked out loud, so, that's how the other half lives. And George said, it's probably more like the other 90%. And she was sort of offended at being corrected, and she said, I could care less. And as he told us the story, he said, I could care more. We could. We're looking at a meal right here. We're about to take it. We're hungry. And let's just remember as we take the supper what we really need and what our brothers and sisters around the world need. Many of them are celebrating today with us, but then many of our brothers and sisters around the world are in prison for their faith or for other reasons, and they can't have this. Bread and wine, bread and juice, just basics of life.